This evening, we have joining us tonight Will McRaney. They have just filed in the Will McRaney case versus NAMB a brief that is a response to the last brief or argument that the North American Mission Board filed to the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court. So I'm going to ask Will to join us. We're glad to have him joining us. Will, it's good to have you joining us this evening, and want to ask you to help us understand some of what's going on here.
I'd love to, Bobby. Good to be with you, and certainly appreciate you and what you're doing and to communicate to Baptists. Baptist people have a right to know, and there's just a lot at stake. So just appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, there really is. A lot of it has to do with autonomy. A lot of other things. There are a lot of buzzwords that people pick up on but don't fully understand sometimes. I do want to real quick, so I don't forget, I want to bring up real quickly your Facebook page. Will, from time to time, does a Facebook Live where he tries to give updates and that kind of thing. Sometimes it's just 10, 15 minutes. A lot of times his wife, Sandy, gets on there and they'll share longer about things that are happening in the case. But I'll also put this link and other links that are relative to this case down in the video description that you can reference after we're done. Well, Will, let's do this. Let's just go ahead and kind of lay the groundwork and start off with just a couple of questions. First, let's lay the groundwork. This brief that was just submitted by your attorney was submitted basically yesterday. And Scott Gant, who's just an outstanding attorney, you've been really blessed to have him working with you. He wrote an incredible document. And I have a copy of the document here, been reading back through it as I know some others have. For those that are interested, there is a link to download this document in the video description. So you can download that, go through and read it. We're not going to be able to unpack the whole thing with all the notes and everything else. It's 26, 27 pages long, I guess. Here, yeah, 27 pages long. So a little bit too long for us to just totally unpack. And to be totally honest, in all fairness, Will, you're not an attorney, nor am I.
That's right.
So you can speak to it from experience, and I can speak to it as this really makes me mad or whatever. But he's the attorney, and I've read lots of legal documents over the years, and I'll just say, just from my limited experience, he's just done a masterful job writing this document and fighting the arguments that he is trying to establish the case. We don't have time to get into it, but I was just dumbfounded when the Northern District Court in Mississippi, the judge, kind of summaried out that thing and just said, no, we're kicking it out and dismissing it. So I'm glad you've been able to appeal. Let me say this, speaking of appeals, you're not on here to beg for money or anything, but this is costing a lot of money. So I want to just let folks know that when we finish, I'm going to get the GoFundMe account that these guys have set up and put it there. If you would like to be able to help and contribute to that, it is fairly expensive. Okay, enough of the commercials. Okay, let's jump on into it here and see what we can discover and let you help us a little bit more. How is NAMB wrong about the subject matter of jurisdiction that's being argued here?
Well, let me back up, Bobby, and just give us a small bit of framework into the case and how this thing all fits together. And so people would understand basically the complaint and then the dismissal. There's basically 6 complaints. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'll let my attorney speak on the legal issues. This is my best attempt. This isn't to override what he has said or somehow make it better. He's, as you said, he's just phenomenal at what he does. And so I certainly appreciate him. It is amazing that the North American Mission Board, the ERLC, and SBC Executive Committee can't seem to get a document filed that accurately reflects Baptist. It's amazing. And yet I have someone that's unaffiliated to Baptist Life, attorney from Washington, D.C., who stepped in at the Supreme Court level before and has done masterful work in not just the arguments, but who Baptists are. And so we have 6 complaints. 3 of those existed while I was the executive director of the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware, and 3 of those complaints happened afterwards. It seems that the EC couldn't get this right, NAMB can't get this right, the judge didn't address the issues. It's just been a fiasco in some ways. So what happened is the judge dismissed the case, saying he didn't have jurisdiction to do it. And so we believe that if he believes that he does not have jurisdiction, then the law requires him to move it from federal court to state court. So we believe he erred in that in a way right out of the chute when he dismissed the case. You know, Bobby, but we were 33 days away from trial. Most of my friends that are legal people would say they've almost never heard of a case being dismissed after 6.5 years, 33 days in advance of trial. And so there's 6 complaints, 3 while I was executive director in Maryland, 3 while I'm not, while I was just a guy on the streets, basically, a minister on the streets. And so this really has ramifications for all Baptist bodies, Baptist ministers, missionaries, mission funds. There is so much at stake here. And a Baptist historian, Dr. Barry Hankins, said as much. He said, every Baptist has something at risk in my case, and they have sided with me, and the historical position of Baptists is with me. It's interesting that the ERLC and NAMB and the EC can't get that right. So it's no wonder the judge has difficulty in this. So when the judge dismissed the case, we appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals there in New Orleans. And so we're in that process right now. So people get up to speed as to how this works. We made an opening brief. We appealed and said, we believe that they erred at the district level. Would you consider our case? We made an opening brief. That brief is available. Then there was an amicus brief written by 61 Baptist leaders. 61. And I'm just give you the categories. Morris Chapman, give you a name first. The executive director, CEO, president of the EC for 20 years. You had EC staff members, EC current members, former EC members, state executives, former state employees, former NAMB employees, former NAMB trustee, vice chairman, Baptist pastors, associational leaders. All of those 61, Bobby, came after we filed our opening brief, trying to defend Baptists against the deception and the false statements made by these other groups. They filed a brief on our behalf within 7 days. Certainly appreciate that. So that's step one. Then NAMB filed what's called an opposition brief. They had 30 days to do it or something like that, I believe. And at the end of November, they filed that. And then after that, we get 21 days to file what's called a reply brief, which is the one that you have in your hand, which is the one you're going to give a link to. And so that's where we are right now. If someone says, well, how does this work? Well, it's almost like a trial. The prosecution is trying to ask the court to do something. The prosecution goes first, defense goes second, and prosecution goes last. So we're now at the final stage at the Fifth Circuit. What will happen now is they will appoint a panel of 3 justices. Those 3 justices will either render a ruling based on the documents that have been filed, or they will schedule, maybe 2 or 3 months out, schedule a 1-hour listening for what's called oral arguments. We've requested it. NAMB has requested it as well. So we anticipate that's what will happen. But there is so much at stake. All the Baptist people, Baptist experts are completely lining up just so I can get to the court to see if they've actually violated the law. As to the Baptist part, everyone has missed it and deceived the courts. It's just tragic. So now that kind of at least tells people where we are. So we're right here. Ours was due yesterday. We'll then hear from the panel as to whether or not they're going to schedule oral arguments, so they'll give us the decision. So sorry about that. That lays the foundation. Now I'll go back to your point. That's what's before the court. So you asked me about subject matter jurisdiction, I believe. So we believe that they do have the district court has got to be able to, as one attorney said, not trying to quote my document or anything else, but has said the courts have to be able to stick their nose under the tent. And everything that happens in any religious circles, what if it was a Muslim and a Catholic? Can the courts cannot figure out basic civil law? Well, we'd say, of course. Well, then what's the difference? I didn't work for NAMB. I didn't report to NAMB. NAMB wasn't giving us so much money that we were providing more back to them. Actually, they didn't give us money. They partnered and put in money that we matched. at a percentage ratio. And so there's so much at stake. So we believe that the court can rule and does have jurisdiction. And if they don't have jurisdiction there at the federal level, I believe, it's my understanding that the law would have it go back to state court. So anything else I'd say about that, Bobby, it would be, like you, I just said, I've read a few legal documents. I'm working on my junior law certificate, kind of in a kidding way. I say that. Certainly don't have any legal background. And we believe they have jurisdiction, and they actually should have. Southern Baptists should not want NAMB or any SBC entity to be able to violate civil laws and damage people or damage a body or a minister and hide under the protection when they have no oversight over a state convention, association, or a local church, which this is where the EC, sadly, I believe, didn't get it right, even in their last brief. So that's where we are. We believe they have jurisdiction. Bobby, I think I've lost you. Oops.
Yeah, it helps to unmute. Sorry. I unwrapped a throat drop. There we went.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm just talking away. So anyway, one of the things that just aggravates me is the North American Mission Board has repeatedly used their language in such a way that it would mislead the court. And that's very intentional. I mean, it's not accidental. Everything from when they talked about the hierarchy and supporting organization to, I mean, those things which we'll address maybe, well, I know we will a little bit later, we've got it down. But then also just the way they refer to Southern Baptist and to their organization. In some of the documents, they put that they were the Southern Baptist Mission Board, they were the Southern Baptist Church, referring in such a way like the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, those kinds of hierarchical organizations, because they know that those who sit on the court, the justices and the judges sitting on the court, they're not Southern Baptist. If there were to be one, it would be few and far in between, but they're not Southern Baptist, so they don't understand the uniqueness of Southern Baptist polity and the uniqueness of autonomy. And so they use language that matches up with what somebody from those other kinds of faith, traditions would be. And right. As such, by using that kind of language simply misleads. Which brings one of the next things that you talk about you don't, but Scott Gant, your attorney, brings up is how inaccurate it is to try to portray the case as a religious or a spiritual dispute. Try to help us understand that a little bit and why that is so critical.
Well, again, this is just my interpretation. I stand by my attorney's document. I'm not going to try to refute that or correct it or actually enhance it any type of way. Just did a great job in that. But I believe that what NAMB is trying to do to the court is to say that the strategic partnership agreement, which is a contract, which is under contract type law, is somehow a religious document. Just because it refers to a religious activity or something else, this is not a document from the Pope. This isn't a document from the higher ups in the Methodist Church or any other hierarchical. This isn't a doctrine. This isn't a theology document. Actually, it doesn't even say how we're going to do our work, other than how we're going to relate in a contract. And so NAMB has tried to make that argument, and I don't know any Baptist leader that believes what they have said to the court. Not one.
Yeah,
there's 42 state conventions. Ask the 42 state conventions. Ask Morris Chapman. Ask. I mean, they're just trying to make up something to instead of dealing with justice, they should be seeking justice. Of all people, the scripture is pretty clear, right? Do justice. They should be seeking that out, as opposed to having people file documents that are false to mislead a court to keep from having justice. I just want to give one example. Matt Martins was the lead attorney when NAMB filed with the United States Supreme Court the last time we were there. He told them, I worked for a Southern Baptist entity. That is 100% Absolutely everybody knows it, false.
Right.
Has NAMB acknowledged it? Has Al Mohler actually acknowledged it, or any other seminary president? Why aren't they speaking? This is not that complicated, but they want to deceive. And so you had a district court in his ruling referred to the Southern Baptist Church. Look, Bobby, this is the way it is. There is actually no such thing as the Southern Baptist Church, or there's
Right.
even the Baptist Church. There are only Baptist churches, not like the Methodist Church, not like the Catholic Church, not like the Presbyterian Church. It doesn't exist. The Southern Baptist Convention has no members. There is
Right.
actually no such thing as a Southern Baptist Church. We can use that language just among ourselves, or people can share that, but it just doesn't exist. You're not a
Right.
member
Yeah.
of the
No,
Southern
no,
Baptist
no.
Convention.
Legally, what it means is you're cooperating, you're affiliating, you're a part of, you're in fellowship with, however you want to phrase that. But there's not a Southern Baptist Church, as in you and I and any other pastor or minister who's watching. They were not
No,
ordained by the Southern Baptist Convention.
Southern Baptist
They were
doesn't
ordained
ordain
by a
anybody. They don't
local.
baptize.
Exactly. They were ordained by a local church. Everything is about the local church among Southern
Right.
Baptists. So, and the argument has been that they're trying to say that this strategic agreement was a religious type doctrine. Religious type document, so that they could claim the ministerial abstention doctrine, and that's what
Well,
they've argued.
which is an
That
argument they had given up on before. They had given up on that argument before. So my attorney deals with that. I encourage every single person, as did I saw a while ago, Bobby, right before we came on, that executive committee member, a current one, um, John Batts from out in the western part, either Washington or Oregon, one of the two, and he has said every Southern Baptist should read this document. It's clear what the issues are, and it's clear that the
absolutely.
North American Mission Board deceived their own trustees. They deceived the BCMD. They have deceived the courts all the way to the United States Supreme Court. That I can stand on, because that cannot be refuted. They have lied over and over
Mm.
and over again. I don't know the technical stuff of the law,
Yeah, and
but I know that.
historically, that's easily proven. Yeah, no, that's easily proven historically, as far as Southern Baptist polity and the way we operate and all that kind of thing,
That's right.
without a doubt. Well, let's transition again. You mentioned the strategic
Okay.
partnership agreements, and those have gone under several different names in the past, but it's just an agreement. I did it, you did it when we were at the state conventions,
That's right.
but NAMB has alleged that you breached the SPA, or Strategic Partnership Agreement, illustrating it's a religious question. They've tried to say that it's all about the religious doctrine, which you've just addressed. I think you've already kind of given a good case for standing against that allegation. But real quickly, just you and I, let's unpack a little bit of how that works, because most folks, if they haven't had direct contact with that, they don't know what the agreement actually has in it. What basically happens
I,
is, in a state convention. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I just gonna say it's a basic document. Most of the state conventions had signed it in 2012 before I became executive director. It was operational. We didn't change it. We didn't. NAM wanted to move to a different agreement later, but I was just getting used to that agreement. I just was learning about it, and so it basically gets some lays out some parameters on how you're going to relate to one another. But what the North American Mission Board did, this, and I don't mind calling names because they did this, and it's in the documents you can read. It's in the facts. I've said it from the very outset. They basically claim that I violated the strategic partnership agreement. So let's push that to the side just 1 second. Let me come back and say, in case I forget, actually, the problems began when the North American Mission Board was actually had a staff member, his name Ron Larson, who was in the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware, raising money directly for NAM in what was called $1 a day program. That was the problem. Ezel told the trustee chairman, Chuck Herring, Mark Dyer, the vice chairman, and Spike Hogan, I believe was the second vice chair then, told them that somehow I was the problem. It just simply is absolutely false. what NAMB repeatedly, ongoing violated the agreement. I can prove it every one of those situations. 6 or 7, it has come out in minutes of the GMB, General Mission Board of Baptist Christian Ministries, of their violations over and over and over again. So what they basically did is said that I was the one that was hard to work with, and that they just wanted me to follow the strategic partnership agreement. And that was particularly only in one area involving 2 people, and that is when we jointly funded a state director of missions and a state director of evangelism. This had been done long before you and I ever got in these positions. You know, Bob, you know how this works. And so there's a process by where the state executive director initiates it. That's what it says in the strategic partnership agreement, and then eventually it has to go through the processes of both boards. So for us, that's the BCMD. It has to go through NAMB's process before a person can be approved to be in one of those joint positions. The supervision and actually the contractual hiring is with the state convention. It was then. And so what NAMB said is that I didn't follow the agreement. Now, what's since come out, you're going to read, if you read this document, you'll see in a short form, I can provide about 5 times as much evidence, but you'll see in 2 paragraphs, or maybe 3 paragraphs, you'll see that's absolutely false, that I did not involve NAMB and that I violated the agreement. It was totally made up for them to get what they wanted to get. I can show Jeff Christopherson lied in his deposition with Jeff Christopherson's emails, not with mine, not with my words. I can prove it with his written statements for both a person named Michael Crawford and then later for a guy named Joel Rainey. And so the whole thing was contrived, Bobby. And what's now is they've been exposed. The king has no clothes. And so the fact that Ezel told the trustees and the officers that I was the problem and that I wasn't following is absolutely 100% false. So we have a lying president of North American Mission Board, lying vice presidents, and then they ignored the actual agreement. That's the way it is. The reason I cannot worry about any case against me saying that for defamation or for libel is because a defense for libel and defamation or slander is the truth. I have just spoken the truth. Those men have repeatedly lied. Simple as that. Did I lose you, Bobby? Oops. Not sure what's happening there, but Bobby, I'm not sure if you're on or not, but if someone is still listening, I'll be happy to provide what there's a Twitter SBC litigation, a guy that is writing on the case, and I'll just provide as I wait on you, in case someone can still hear what he said today. I just found this actually tonight. He said McRaney filed his reply brief, which completes the briefing before argument. If you want to understand a dispute, the reply brief is often the place to start. It's the movant or the person making the motions last chance to rebut. And so they usually target the real disagreements. And so that's what the SBC litigation actually wrote. Then he wrote this: what's important? What does McRaney's team think is important? This isn't what I'm saying. This is what he said. He said, our quick take is point 1 says that the case should go back to the state court in the Fifth Circuit if it agrees with NAMB about federal abstention doctrine. And so he says, SBC litigation says that it has to go back to state courts. Point 2, he says, NAMB slandered McRaney and it wasn't about religion. See, NAMB wants to make it about religion when they want to lie against me publicly to the people, to our leaders, everything else. He says this: NAMB said McRaney breached an agreement, talking about the strategic partnership agreement, by failing to get an advance permission to hire and then tried to run him out of the SBC by calling him a liar, delusional, a nutcase, and no integrity. Then SBC litigation says you don't have to be a Baptist to decide if McRaney got permission or not. I mean, the evidence is clear. Then he says point 3. He said it gets very clear on page 16 with bullet points, and he talks about several different points. He talked about that our board voted unanimous support of me. It talked about our officers, 3 of them, writing a letter back to NAMB when Kevin said I violated the agreement repeatedly. I wrote them back and said McRaney didn't. We have evidence from our attorney, outside attorney in the BCMD, who wrote and said, has communicated that I didn't violate the spirit, the law, the legal, the details, or the spirit of the agreement. And then you just keep moving forward on this. It's clear with Joel Rainey that NAMB had a chance to have input. It's clear with Michael Crawford, NAMB clearly had a chance to have input. I didn't violate it. They just wanted what they wanted, and it didn't matter if they lied. So then he closes with this. He says, it will say you don't do things even when there's a paper trail that says you did it. And the reason I can be so confident in this, Bobby, is because a paper trail shows all of this. It's not my opinion. The documents are there. I just wish the NAMB trustees would have then taken my letter of concern. I had no intentions of going to court. I was 14 months after NAMB's attorney started contacting me before I ever got an attorney and started even considering legal proceedings. So,
Yeah,
so
a lot of
maybe
people
the
don't know that. Yeah.
maybe the new there's 20 new trustees at NAMB. Obviously, the NAMB president probably and other entity heads have too much to do, too much input into who becomes their trustees. That should change. That's a system issue. It's not an individual person's issue, but it's a system issue. But maybe those 21 trustees will say, we will demand an account. We're going to at least do what Proverbs 18:17 says, which is said to get both sides and cross-examine what Israel has said. It's clear. The evidence is clear. All you have to do is to want to know the truth. Until the NAMB trustees want to know the truth, they're not going to see it. And when they get ready to know it, it's easy to find.
Yeah, that's for certain. I put the link up there. If you're on Twitter or X, you can follow SBC litigation, and they're staying up. In fact, I did a video the other day where we're talking about all the different legal cases, and right now there's like 27 or 28 different cases that SBC litigation is following, including the David Platt McLean Church, and I mean there's a bunch of them, including some abuse cases. So that is a good source. They're keeping up with that. Of real concern, Will, is this issue of religious liberty. Now, Scott Gant, your attorney, and again, let me say it again for folks that have joined late. The document we're talking about is the brief that you have filed, the response document that your attorney filed yesterday. You can download a copy of that. It's in the video description, so feel free to do that. But how does NAMB's arguments threaten religious liberty? They say it doesn't, but what's your position on that?
Well, I don't, again, we're in a heavy legal issue. I would just refer back to what my attorney said, and I would refer to what Barry Hankins said. A Baptist historian has nothing. He's got it would take a ream of paper just to almost get his resume. Just has done some remarkable work through the years on Baptist life. And he said, actually, if NAMB were to win the case, it says in the document, it says it in his expert report. See, I paid to get an expert opinion on this. Actually, it even says what I paid you, $300 an hour. It's in the court records, so it's not a secret. And he wrote a report to the court, and he said if NAMB's argument was to prevail, religious liberty, First Amendment, would be in jeopardy. It's the exact opposite of what NAMB says. But when NAMB has started with lies and continued with lies, what do liars, Bobby, tend to do? They just do what they do. So people can make up their own mind, and they can look at themselves. I'm not a First Amendment expert. I know what the expert says. I know what my attorney says. I know that no Baptist out there wants to protect any Southern Baptist entity leader from defaming, which is one of my complaints. What's religious about defaming someone?
Right. Yeah.
What if a entity head said regarding a state convention or association or local church, such and such is having an affair, and he calls the church? Under what? The EC tried to file that didn't get accepted. And the arguments to others, they would want the person to have no recourse.
Right.
That sounds unthinkable, except it's not.
Well, and the reality is, these are the kind of things that should be worked out among Christian brothers. And a key point that you made a minute ago, just kind of in passing, but I think it's a huge deal. People get all up in arms about this ended up in court, but you had attorneys contacting you for 17, 18 months before you ever responded at all, because you kept arguing and requesting, look, let's get together, let's work this out, let's talk this out.
Yeah.
And the reality is, what we know is this same kind of thing has happened repeatedly. This isn't a one-time thing. It's not like, oh, Will's just, he's got an axe to grind, he's all upset. We know this has happened multiple times.
That's right.
And there are fellows who now have left being executive directors in some states that can go back and tell you horror stories. I remember one, I won't mention his name. I don't have his permission, but I remember one of the fellows that told me upon his retiring, he said, Bobby, I am so glad to get out from underneath all of the crazy pressure. And I said, so is your convention that bad? Meaning his state convention. He goes, no. He said, our people are great. He said, we have our typical little, conflicts. He said, it's not that. He said, the reality is it's all of the stuff going on from the SBC entity level. He said, all this stuff with NAMB, he said, it's driving me crazy. We never know what to believe. We never know what's happening. They're constantly begging to shift money around, and all this other kind of stuff. So we know multiple cases where something has happened and the North American Mission Board has kind of taken aim at individuals to try to move them out of the way if they don't line up with what they say. The problem is if your case fails, and again, I'm not an attorney, okay? This is my personal 2 cents worth, or maybe 1.75 cents worth. I don't know, but my personal 1.75 cents worth is if you ultimately fail and NAMB's arguments sustain themselves, then it puts in harm's way, literally, churches, individual churches. It could be associations, it could be state conventions, anybody whoever, whether it be Kevin Ezell or someone else at NAMB dislikes, then he could leverage and say, hey, look, we don't want them to have that job. He could call ahead, like he did in my case coming to Atlanta. He could call ahead and say, hey, you don't want to hire this person, going to be nothing but trouble for you, or whatever. And dissuade people and say, look, we want to be a good partner with you, but if you hire that person, we're not going to be. Or they could actually say, we're going to withhold money from your state convention or the partnership agreement we have with your association. We're going to withhold that if you don't get rid of this person. So the issues of the language they've used about being a supporting organization is really critical. One of the last arguments that Scott makes in this document, and again, you can download it from the video description, but NAMB claimed to be a supporting organization of the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware, where you were serving. And the problem is if that is the case and that sustains itself, then that basically means that they could have influence over who's hired or fired, over the ministry approach, over anything of any state convention, any association, or any church that they are unhappy with. Am I misreading that, or is that the gist of kind of what's going on here?
That's my understanding. That's what, again, I'm not a lawyer, but that's what lawyer friends that are not my attorneys, but lawyer friends tell me. If they're a supporting organization for the BCMD, they're a supporting organization for every other state convention. That means every state worker then falls up under NAMB. That means they could write to defame and interfere against each one of them. And that could apply to association or anything else. And so no one believes this. They continue to deceive the courts. That's a strong statement. It's hard to believe that we tend to, Bobby, when you know this, look, we're all have feet of clay. One day we're going to stand before Jesus and we're going to be pretty amazed of God's grace and mercy towards us all, right? But when you have continued willful patterns, you are partnering with the spiritual enemy, because you're partnering with darkness. You're partnering with lies and deception. And if it is the NAMB trustees who have the responsibilities, they are messengers. They're actually elected, not necessarily messengers. They are elected by the messengers of the SBC to be SBC representatives to the North American Mission Board and every other entity. They do not represent NAMB in its fullest sense. Their first responsibility is first to do things honorably before God, and secondly towards the SBC who elected them. And so it's just amazing. We tend to think that we elect these people, that there's some level, maybe their charisma has got way beyond their character. So we know we have failed strategy. We know we have failed character. And the only way in the Baptist system, Southern Baptist system, is for the trustees to act. And no one can make them act. But the courts are going to, I just don't know how many more times these organizations are going to file documents that are so blatantly wrong, containing lies, sometimes maybe misleading, but that is so. And I mean, Jesus said, I am the way and the truth. I am the truth. High commitment to truth and to justice. And this is, it's just, it's appalling. It's shocking to the system. I'm just a guy trying to do my job in Maryland.
Yeah.
And this is what I had to deal with. You were just in Michigan and experienced the same kind of thing. Kevin Ezell has done enough things. I probably can name 100 things that if it's anybody else, they'd be fired. But when you have this level of control and power and this much money, it can buy a lot of things. But we're dependent upon the courts to do what the NAMB trustees could have done. It wouldn't have negated my right to go to the court, but it would have taken away the need for me to go to the court.
Right. Well, and part of the problem, and we've already talked about this and kind of alluded to it already. Part of the problem is it isn't isolated just at NAMB. I just pulled up another paragraph. Let me just read this. This is from Scott Gant's writing in this brief. That's your attorney. And he's talking about some of this. He says, NAMB has also deployed other arms of the SBC in its campaign against McRaney. For instance, the SBC's Baptist Press told a prominent journalist who had previously worked as a freelancer that she might get future work if she, quote, would stop writing about Will McRaney, end quote. Now, who maintains and manages and controls Baptist Press? The executive committee. And why is the executive committee complacent? I mean, the whole process of filing amicus briefs can be very confusing for we laity who don't understand all the legal jargons. But the idea is to try to lend support to an argument, right? That's very, very important. So you mentioned a little while ago those 61 individuals, myself included, who signed on to the amicus brief that Randy Adams kind of spearheaded with Northwest Baptist Convention and some others to help support your case, to say, look, many of these arguments North American Mission Board have done are irrelevant. I said long time ago that the executive committee should have, as soon as the North American Mission Board used statements like they were a supporting organization, the ERLC used hierarchy, used all that kind of language, that the ERLC should have filed a document, an amicus brief in support of your argument that that's not the case. Now, again, I don't understand all the stuff about amicus briefs, but I've just been frustrated that somebody somewhere among Southern Baptists, our other big state conventions, our Southern conventions, our other organizations, our entity heads, our seminaries, anybody other than just you haven't stood up and said, look, this is the way it is for Baptists. This is our polity, right? This is the way we work, and this is not accurate. But yet they've all remained silent. How has that made you feel to be on the receiving end and to know that, man, people they know better, they know better. In fact, those at the North American Mission Board who are authorizing their attorneys to write these documents submitted to the Northern District in Mississippi, to the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals before, and to the U.S. Supreme Court. They made the appeal to the Supreme Court, not you. And all this stuff has shown up, but yet they've remained silent. How does that make you guys feel?
It's certainly very frustrating, as you expressed, Bobby. And you know, I've said before, and it's not a secret thing. I mean, I said a lot. I mean, I probably have. Kevin Easel said in his deposition, I have 200 hours of videos. I probably have, and certainly I could have misspoken somewhere there. But in terms of factual stuff that I've claimed as factual stuff, as far as I know, I had missed a mark. If I had, do you think they would just blow me up? But the things you're talking about, every Baptist knows. You see, if you listen to Dr. Randy Adams, he had conversations with executive committee, legal personnel, in-house counsel, and others, and they basically said Southern Baptists will never stand for this because we're asking them to just speak the truth about Baptists, not whether Kevin interfered, not whether he defamed. They don't know that. Just speak truth to this. They said the Southern Baptists will never take this, and this is not precedent-setting court a case. Now, I got news for them. We've already been to the United States Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court had taken my case and ruled against me and given NAMB the rights that NAMB claimed to have absolute rights and privileges over state convention workers, and that could include other people too. They said we didn't defame, but we have the absolute right and privilege to do this, to defame and to interfere. Who gave them that privilege? And so the EC had an opportunity to speak to this long ago. You had a 55-year attorney. This is not complicated, but they thought, I believe they thought, maybe standing behind their sole membership issue, or maybe this is just a district court level. But now I'm before the United States Fifth Circuit. If the court ends up ruling against me there and it buys into NAMB's deceptions, do you understand? Does everyone out there understand, Bobby, that the only way that a Baptist minister will then get protection over that was just taken away would be to take a case to the United States Supreme Court, and then not just take it there, they actually have to hear it and provide a ruling contrary. There is so much at stake. The EC, the NAMB, and the ERLC, by filing different papers and writing different papers and publishing papers, they have placed so much at risk. This needs to come to an end. Just do what the Bible would say, is just make restitution to me. It's a legal concept because a lot of our legal stuff is based on Christian principles. We understand this. Right. Make restitution to me and do what is right. Sandy and I was basically unemployed. Some of the people out here don't know my background. They don't have to know it all. That's fine. I feel like I just played baseball and football in college at Mississippi State. I was kind of a broken down baseball pitcher. That's kind of how I see myself, right? It's the humor of God that he would call me in the ministry. But I was a 11-year professor working in evangelism, church planting. That's my background. I wrote a personal evangelism textbook that trained people all over the United States and several parts of the world. It's in multiple different languages. I've probably done as much research and writing on Southern Baptist church planting as anyone in the history of Southern Baptist life. It doesn't mean I know everything. It just means these are my fields. These are my disciplines. And so God has prepared me for this. I so wish it would come to an end. But for that to happen, some NAMB trustees are going to have to do what's right. Or maybe some of Kevin's friends, maybe a Jack Graham. I don't know who else has influence. We need statesmen. We're just full of politicians. Politicians lick their finger, Bobby, and they stick it in the wind and figure out what's good for them. Statesmen do what is right. Morris Chapman is one of the last statesmen we had in the Southern Baptist Convention. He didn't do what was just in his best interest. He actually did what was in the best interest of the future of Baptists. And so we should have a big enough God, Bobby. I'm almost preaching here. We should have a big enough God that we should be able to do what is right before God and trust him with the results. If someone blindly thinks they're protecting the cooperative program, that's foolishness.
Yeah.
And the idea is that God doesn't get a vote, that somehow we're going to have to help God because we're trying to do his mission. That's just nonsense. So for the trustees to not act, for the EC to not act, for the EC's attorneys to not act, for state conventions to remain, many of them remain silent, is just unfathomable. So, Bobby, I was unemployed 4 years. You know what it's like. I probably made $40,000 over a 4-year period of time. You can look at my tax return. NAMB has my tax returns. But I've spent spent $225,000 out of our pocket. My attorneys probably have billable hours that probably now approaching $2.5 million, maybe $3 million. My guess is NAMB's is probably a good bit north of $3 million. I don't know how much they've been billed for it or how much insurance companies paid for it. But it's all because some people wouldn't speak and look at the facts of the case. And they just deceive. They wrote me letters of denial. This within 20 hours after I wrote a letter of concern in February of 2016, 6 months after my termination, 7 months. I just said, these are my concerns. And I wrote them, five major concerns. And I got a letter within 20 hours, complete denial, signed by the officers. Then I started getting attorneys letters from their attorneys. So I started publishing information online. I started speaking online. I developed a website. People can look at the evidence. So I'm a little frustrated. I'm not deterred. I'm not bitter. Sandy and I are not bitter. You don't go through this long. It just eat us up on the inside. God can take care of Kevin Ezel and he can take care of NAMB and everyone else. But I am resolved. Kevin called me a gnat, but I'm pretty persistent as a gnat, I guess. That's fine.
Was that in the deposition he did that?
No, he did. He did that before calling me a gnat, so that's fine. Whatever. And just call me delusional and all kinds of manner of stuff. Anyway, it makes no difference because I don't work for Kevin. I don't answer to Kevin. I answer to Jesus. And so we're just going to persistently pursue justice. And when God leads us to do something different about this, we will. But there's so much at stake. If we have walked away, if I had not spent the extra last $75,000 to work on this appeal process, now again, that's a fraction. My attorney's hourly rate, I think it's published, but it's well north of $1,500 an hour. This just is, I don't know what they're paying. NAMB's got the number one legal litigating firm in the United States, Will McRaney, got 3 attorneys from there, the largest firm in the state of Mississippi. I don't know what they're spending. They can spend whatever they want, but they're making false arguments to the courts. And the facts don't support anything Kevin and Jeff Christopherson and Steve Davis and Carlos Ferrer and Mike Ebert have said.
Oh yeah, and that's been repetitive, and we're really out of time. We don't need to keep going, but you've just well, never mind. I get more worked up about it, I think, than you do sometimes. It just really aggravates me to see cooperative program dollars that are going, and I'm sure I mean NAMB sues other people way more than people know and understand, but they have a team of lawyers there, at the North American Mission Board, but they have hired these high-powered, high-dollar attorney law firms to represent them in addition to what they already have, in addition to who the insurance company has to fight this case. So, you said maybe $3 million. My guess is it's a lot more than that. And I'm not sure where all that money's coming from either, but I'm not real happy about, cooperative program dollars going to pay for all of that either, in the midst of all of that. I know I read, and we need to wrap up. So let me kind of close with this. Online today, I was following one of the threads of something that I'd posted, and a pastor said that he was at the convention when Morris Chapman spoke against the Great Commission resurgence. And a lot of people thought he was just angry. They thought he was just bitter. They thought he was just kicking the dirt, upset. But what this fellow said was, he said, everything I know now and what I have learned, he said, I wish we had listened to Morris Chapman. He said, I just thought he was upset and angry. He said, but he was right on target. And we're reaping the benefit of not listening, or not the benefit, but we're reaping the results. Yeah, the consequences of the results of not listening to what he said. And you just have to look back about Morris. And I don't know. I mean, I've met him, but I don't know Morris Chapman at all, really. You just have to say, okay, this is a person of character, because he stood and faced what he knew was going to be huge opposition to say, look, this isn't a good direction to go. And many people have thought very poorly of him for a long time. But it's like you said, this amicus brief that was filed in support of your case and standing with you, Morris Chapman was one of those who signed. And I appreciate him doing that and voicing his support, in that way as well, without a doubt. Well, Will, I want to.
Bobby, let me hit
go
just
ahead.
one more point. Let me kind of close at one point. You may have given me an opportunity to do this, but I want to.
Yeah. No. And this is your Facebook
of,
page. I want you to be able, folks, to make sure and remember they can check you out and make sure and follow you, because you do updates along the way. So go ahead. Yeah, right. Please close us out.
So I just want to say, same thing we've tried to walk with Jesus, try to walk with integrity in these matters. Certainly, if you many words, you're going to get some stuff wrong, right? Occasionally, but we have tried to be upright with this. Someone has described us as happy warriors. We're not running around angry, mad. We're not. I don't have time for all that kind of stuff. There's people to be reached, and we're leading a church, and got other stuff that we're engaged in preparing leaders. But it's as if the North American Mission Board, and I'm concerned that, and so are some other leaders, that this is too indicative of too many of our entities, and maybe not everyone. But here's what it says in I believe it's on page 13 in the brief, and I think I would say this is pretty indicative of how Kevin Ezell actually operates himself. It says this: taking account of these facts, is talking about this supporting organization issue. It says it's apparent that NAMB's executive vice president of public relations, again, that's the guy doing all the PR, Mike Ebert, said the quiet part out loud when he admitted in emails, this is emails, part of the discovery, that NAMB's claim that it is a supporting organization of BCMD was conjured up for this matter alone. Let me repeat. The supporting organization claim was conjured up for this matter alone, stating that defense is limited, quote, to the facts of this specific case. Either you're a supporting organization or you're not. And these guys have simply made it up. They made it up in Maryland. They made up the rules. They followed what they wanted to follow and didn't want to follow. They owe me and Baptists everywhere massive apologies for just the way they have utterly not stewarded well and dishonored the stewardship entrusted to them. And this is how they operate. Simply make it up, whether they're making up numbers, and I can prove it, or making up claims to the Supreme Court, the Fifth Circuit, or district. I mean, they just make it up. Listening to them in depositions, half the time, Jeff Christopherson may have been sincere, and Jeff is a nice guy. He is a nice guy. I don't know anybody that thinks he's not. But he got it wrong over and over and over. And I can't tell you if he was that missing it or he's just that lying that many times. And what happened? They just do this. And they have gotten away with it. And sadly, they've gotten away with it. But maybe now in the courts, they won't. Let's hope the NAMB trustees will act. Certainly, I'm going to keep seeking restitution. But what Southern Baptists actually need, the courts cannot provide.
Yeah, that's
they
exactly
need
right.
Massive levels of repentance and humility, and they owe a lot of people. Jeff, I won't chase the details, but it's you. I can remember the maddest I've been in this whole case when I was told, one, I knew that Larry Cheek, you had applied for a job, or they considered you for a job, and Kevin picked up his phone, NAMB paid for his phone, NAMB paying his salary, calls and tries to keep you from getting work. That should get him fired, if nothing else. What is it his business to be doing that? And that's the maddest I've been. And then I had a former NAMB associate vice president, the maddest I got, standing up. I can tell you where I stand in my house when he told me he was in meetings. You don't have a case before, but I'm gonna speak to this. He told me on the phone that he was in meetings where name was discussed to be taken out. That is tragic. And NAMB trustees must come to some repentance themselves and talk about the failures they have had. That includes Chuck Carey, Mark Dyer, who's an attorney, Spike Hogan, Danny Wood, Danny DeArmas. It includes all those guys. They're not bad guys necessarily, but if you can't continue to be a good guy and watch and participate in deception and do nothing.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And the reality is, that is a small sliver of my story. It sounds about identical to your story. What was
is.
taking place? Yeah, and then you and I have both found out since all of that, and some of that's come to light, how that has happened in other situations with
It is.
other individuals.
That's right.
And a lot of people have been hurt. A lot of people have been hurt, no doubt. And it's just it's just inexcusable, to be real honest. At that point, there's just no doubt about it at all, for sure. Without any doubt. Well, look, Will, let's do this. Let's go ahead and wrap up for tonight. We want to try to keep our watchers of our podcast up to date on things that are happening and what's happening in your case. Encourage them to go ahead and follow you on Facebook. But I hope folks will go ahead and continue to be praying for Will and Sandy McRaney in this case. And we just pray that not only will revival come to our entities and those in those locations, but also to our convention as a whole, as we seek God and just pray that these things can be resolved in a godly way as well. So thank you again for joining us. Hope you'll join us again next